This is the Daily Roundup on the eArts Cambodia channel. A very good evening to you. I'm Andrew Barnes-Robert. Making headlines tonight. The Prime Minister urges the Education Ministry to consider reopening schools wherever it is safe to do so. America's last troops leave Afghanistan after 20 years of occupation that have only put the Taliban back in power. And the UN hails the end of leaded petrol as Algeria becomes the last country on earth to run out of the highly toxic fuel. Prime Minister Hun Sen has urged the Minister of Education to start reopening schools as soon as possible. He wants to start with schools in areas with low rates of COVID-19 infection. The Prime Minister delivered a speech on Tuesday morning, pointing out that most rural areas across the kingdom have very few cases of the coronavirus. He says the Ministry of Education should start reopening their schools to avoid student dropouts, which he says could lead to a more serious situation in the country. The Prime Minister has stressed, though, that any decisions to reopen schools will be left to the Education Minister and provincial governors. EAC News reporter Reo Soko has our top story.
Prime Minister Hun Sen has suggested that Minister of Education Hang Chun-narong reopen schools wherever it is safe to do so. He has emphasized that with the duration of school closures nationwide, it could be a more serious problem for the country when students are not learning at all. The Prime Minister says students in rural areas do not have access to the internet for online learning. In most rural areas, teachers are providing workbooks or home assignments, often with only part-time parental supervision. The Prime Minister says this leaves him feeling fearful for the future of the kingdom's children. He says they might even forget the alphabet if their schools remain closed for much longer. He's now urging the Minister of Education and governors to have a serious look at when schools can reopen safely.
I think rural schools, even at the primary level for children under 12, can go back to school because there are no infections. I suggest flexible thinking and practical implementation of the preventative measures in each province when it comes to reopening schools. Where it is possible to open a school, then let it reopen, while for places where it is not possible, then students should learn remotely or online. Where possible, let there be a mix of face-to-face learning and distance learning, otherwise our young children will be in a dangerous position. The majority of the population of Phnom Penh and Kandal are already protected against COVID-19. Infections in Phnom Penh are declining, and those who become infected do not develop serious illness. Mortality has also decreased. So this is a positive point for the reopening of the socio-economic sector across the country, including the field of education.
As of Monday, over 1.5 million children between the ages of 12 and 17 have already received at least their first dose of Sinovac. More than 300,000 have been fully vaccinated. The Prime Minister says booster shots will also be given to children to give them even more protection against the virus. An additional 2 million doses of Sinovac arrived in the kingdom from China on Tuesday morning. Reyes Soko, EAC News.
Teachers and lecturers have welcomed the Prime Minister's announcement. Both public and private school teachers and university lecturers have been working from home for well over 6 months and say they're desperate to get back to in-person learning. EAC News reporter Johnny McCune has that story.
Schools and universities shut their doors in March to stem the spread of the virus. Although universally deemed a good idea, it has led parents to having to homeschool, meaning one parent may have had to actually forfeit a much-needed source of income. Meanwhile, teachers have become keyboard warriors, tirelessly working from home as they teach online. But there's light at the end of the tunnel. The National Paediatric Hospital is administering booster shots to public teachers who have welcomed the Prime Minister's speech on Tuesday.
For me, I think it's good because we all want the students to attend school physically so that they can meet other students, exchange ideas and learn. However, like my child, he has stayed at home alone and it's hard for him to exchange ideas with other students. So it's better if the schools go back to normal.
នៅក្នុងថ្នាក់អីចឹងណា
He believes reopening the schools is the best way forward to get students back to some sense of normality.
Once again, the kingdom's number of active COVID-19 cases has ticked up, with new cases outnumbering recoveries for the 6th day running. Healthcare workers are now dealing with 2,359 COVID-19 patients. The latest figures were released by the Health Ministry shortly before noon on Tuesday. 439 new cases have been reported, including 123 imported ones. 11 patients have died in the past 24 hours. They take the kingdom's total number of COVID-19 related fatalities to 1,903. The country's total COVID case count has topped 93,055. Successful treatments have risen to 88,786, with 343 patients having been discharged since Monday. Despite reports to the contrary, British nationals arriving in Cambodia do qualify for alternative state quarantine. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has informed the British Embassy that passengers from the UK can book their own quarantine directly at one of the 4 approved hotels. In an official note to the British Embassy, the Interministerial Committee to Combat COVID-19 has clarified that British nationals do not need to stay at the OK Boutique Hotel on Street 174 in Phnom Penh, but can book their quarantine directly at one of the capital's 4 ASQ hotels. Those are Sofitel, Soka Hotel, Courtyard by Marriott Phnom Penh, and Raffles Hotel Le Royal. There was some confusion when the ASQ pilot project first launched, with British nationals apparently being told they could not book their 14-day quarantine stays directly and had to stay at the OK Boutique Hotel. Alternative state quarantine was launched last month and allows incoming passengers to pre-book their 14-day stays. Those passengers with no prior bookings are being sent to quarantine hotels at random on arrival at Phnom Penh International. The 2 dead bodies recently discovered in Phnom Penh are believed to be foreign nationals. Locals in Cam Ranh village in the capital's Kambul district told EAC News that no locals have been reported missing in recent months and say the clothes found at the scene don't look familiar either. The area where the bodies of the man and woman were found this past week is surrounded by factories. EAC News reporter Reo Soko visited the scene of the crime.
An area contained trash and plastic bottles everywhere, 2 shallow holes dug out of the ground, with some human remains even left behind. This is how the crime scene looks after a police forensic investigation. The male victim, believed to be between 45 and 60 years old, had gunshot wounds. The female victim, estimated to be around 35 to 40 years old, had a fractured skull. Kambul District Deputy Police Chief Chim Savot says they are treating it as a homicide that appears to have happened about 6 months ago. EAC News spoke to the village chief. Sue Saurn says no one has been reported missing in the area or even nearby.
I think these people buried were not from our village because no one has lost a family member. From the clothes that they were wearing, they don't look like they're from here. They must be from a very far place. This is the first time it's happened in my village. It never happened before.
Local warehouse owner Haim Suvan says there has been a lot of foot traffic here in recent months, with the area popular for dope smokers.
Many people, but all of them are farmer. Yeah, many people, but not the business and just a farmer come and across to do the farm, like many farm here.
Cam Ranh village resident Mias Rorn says she's scared about what's happened with her home being just along the main road. She says she's seen people in cars going to the place where the bodies were found.
I have been living here for 3 years and never been scared until this happened. Now we, my family members, are so afraid at night that we don't even have the courage to go out to the toilet. We also go to sleep early now, before the dead bodies were found. We normally go to bed at around 8 to 9 in the evening, but now we all go to sleep at 7.
With the crime scene investigation complete, police are now hunting for those responsible.
The bodies were buried on the side of a small road, around 200 meters away from the main road. As you can see here, the area has already been cordoned off by the investigating team. But 3 big questions will need answering. Who were these people? What exactly led to their deaths? And why were they just murdered? Rhea Soko, EAC News, Phnom Penh.
The United States has completed its controversial and shambolic withdrawal from Afghanistan. 20 years of effective occupation came to an end in the early hours of Tuesday morning as the last U.S. military plane left Kabul's Hamid Karzai International Airport. The U.S. leaves a shattered nation back in the hands of the very group it went in to destroy. Major General Chris Donahue, commander of the 82nd Airborne Division, photographed as he stepped aboard a C-17 transport plane. He was the last U.S. service member to leave Afghanistan. The flight ends a hasty and humiliating exit, with Washington and its allies carrying out a massive but chaotic airlift over the past 2 weeks. Tens of thousands of Afghans who helped Western countries and might have qualified for evacuation have been left behind. Across Kabul, gunfire rang out in celebration at news that the U.S. withdrawal had been completed. Soon after the final U.S. military flight left, members of the Taliban walked across the tarmac, telling reporters that everything will be fine. But the airport has been left with no air traffic control and remains vulnerable to rocket attacks by Islamic State. All civilian aircraft are being advised to stay well clear of Afghan airspace, at least for the time being. That advisory puts a big question mark over U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's remarks in Washington that the U.S. would continue working with its international partners to get its remaining civilians and Afghan associates out of the country.
We will work to secure their safe passage. This morning, I met with the foreign ministers of all the G7 countries, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Canada, Italy, Japan, as well as Qatar, Turkey, the European Union, and the Secretary General of NATO. We discussed how we will work together to facilitate safe travel out of Afghanistan, including by reopening Kabul's civilian airport as soon as possible. And we very much appreciate the efforts of Qatar and Turkey in particular to make this happen. This would enable a small number of daily charter flights, which is a key for anyone who wants to depart from Afghanistan moving forward. We're also working to identify ways to support Americans, legal permanent residents, and Afghans who have worked with us and who may choose to depart via overland routes.
Back in Kabul, Taliban commander Qari Samullah says the group will do its best to establish a safe atmosphere in the country and that together the people of Afghanistan will build a new homeland. On the streets there is fear, though, with memories still fresh of the Taliban's previous regime, during which music was banned, women were not allowed to work, and girls were barred from education. Public executions were also commonplace. The United Nations says the country is facing a dire humanitarian crisis, cut off from foreign aid amid a drought, mass displacement, and the pandemic. A chaotic occupation may be over, but an extremely uncertain future has begun. And now for a look at some other news making headlines around the world this Tuesday, the 31st of August. More than 1 million people across Louisiana and Mississippi could be in the dark for weeks as officials take stock of the damage from Hurricane Ida. Widespread power outages reached as far north as over 250 kilometers from where the hurricane made landfall. Ida hit Louisiana on Sunday as a Category 4 storm, packing winds of 240 kilometers an hour. It was the 5th strongest to ever hit the U.S. mainland, exactly 16 years after Hurricane Katrina. At least 4 people have been killed. New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell expects that number to grow as over 5,000 National Guard members launch a search and rescue operation. The good news for the city is that its flood defenses, strengthened in Katrina's aftermath, have done their job. Governor John Bell Edwards says the levees have performed magnificently, but the damage is still catastrophic. An equally bad time being experienced by Mexico, with dramatic footage capturing the intensity of Hurricane Nora. Locals told Reuters the house had already been evacuated before it collapsed. Nora has now weakened to a tropical storm and has claimed the life of at least one person. In other parts of the region, towns have been flooded, trees have been uprooted, and power lines are down. Nora is expected to continue weakening as it moves north-northwest over the next few days. And a major step forward for the health of the planet. Leaded petrol has been eliminated after the world's last remaining stocks were used up last month. The UN's Environment Programme has been working for the past 19 years to end the use of the poisonous substance that poses major health and environment risks. Algeria was the last country on Earth to be using it and exhausted its final stocks in July. The UN says leaded petrol has been contaminating air, soil, and drinking water. It's been linked to heart disease, stroke, and cancer. Some studies even show it harms brain development, especially in children. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres called its eradication an international success story.
Ending the use of leaded petrol will prevent more than 1 million premature deaths each year from heart disease, strokes, and cancer. And it will protect children whose IQs are damaged by exposure to lead.
He says the elimination of leaded petrol shows what can be achieved through collaboration and called for similar initiatives towards emissions-free transport and tackling climate change. Stay with the Daily Roundup. Coming up after the break, a look at your sports news. EAC News fully supports the Royal Government of Cambodia's preventative and administrative measures against COVID-19. But we need you to play your part in helping bring the 20 February community transmission event to an end. Wash your hands regularly, sanitize wherever possible. Keep an eye on your body temperature. Use the Stop COVID QR code and maintain a safe social distance. But above all, please, 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 wear a mask. Only together can we beat COVID-19. eArts Cambodia's audience is growing. Our YouTube channel now has 150,000 verified subscribers. To mark the milestone, we've received the Silver Creator Award from YouTube, given to channels with over 100,000 subscribers. YouTube CEO Susan Wojcicki says the award celebrates eArts Cambodia's hard work and incredible achievement. She says not only has eArts Cambodia brought a unique voice and style to the world, but has also created valuable connections and built a community along the way. The next milestone we're going for is 1 million subscribers, and we'd really like that Gold Creator Award. So if you're not already a subscriber, head to www